15. Good afternoon. We're pleased to be broadcasting to you live from beautiful downtown Arequipa. My name is Debra Burgess, and I'm the Senior English Language Fellow here. And my colleague is
Lourdes Talavera. I am an academic coordinator here at Cultural, and I have experience working for a lot of years, like 15 years in schools and more than 20 years here in Cultural as an English teacher as well. And as you can see, the title of our presentation is Creating a Caring Classroom that Fosters Students' English Language Production. And what is this about? Well, strategies, best practices, and practical tips that encourage and support the students' oral language production will be shared with everybody, okay? My colleague and I will present our framework for a creative, caring, and communicative-based approach for English language production.
great. As you can see by the slide on the screen, we hope that this is going to be a very interactive presentation. We're looking and hoping that you're going to be writing us comments or asking questions. And so we're going to start out with a question for you. And that question, as you can see on the screen, is what are the teaching and learning challenges in your classroom for developing students' oral language production? And on the next slide, Lourdes and I have talked about a few of the challenges that we see, and maybe some of these are some that you have experienced in your classroom. So Lourdes, tell us a little bit about some of the problems or the challenges, not problems, that you have had in your class, English language classroom.
Okay, like for example, hours. Sometimes, well, in public schools here in Peru, the problem is that they have just 2 hours of English a week, which is,
wow.
You know, you don't have much time to do oral production. And on top of that, sometimes the classroom size, you know, you have lots of students, like 40 students, so it is kind of hard because maybe students do not have the time, the chance to participate. At least you try, but sometimes it's impossible. Well, you have to sometimes to do a lot of group work, but it is not enough. Yeah. You can get like monitor all their oral production. Okay.
And that's, you're talking the public school, but we're actually broadcasting live from the Centro Cultural Peruano Norteamericano here in Arequipa, which is a binational center.
Mm-hmm.
And I assume that even here, where students are coming in for 5 days a week, you have some of the similar problems.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the thing is that sometimes you have to cover the materials they assign to you to cover during the month, and sometimes you don't get to make everybody participate. Okay, here we have like from 20 to 25 students in a class sometimes. I mean, it's a big number.
But my public school teacher friends have told me it's more common to have 40 to 50
yes.
students in a classroom.
In public schools.
So makes it very difficult to have a lot of language production for them. That's something I hear. Something else I hear a lot of is that students just aren't motivated.
Okay, yeah, that's a very hard problem, you know, because sometimes teachers do not realize that this is an important part of teaching as well. So you concentrate so much on the contents and you forget your students' feelings, okay? If your students, are there or are paying attention, or they feel enthusiastic, or they feel motivated, right, to listen to your class.
So I wonder if any of you out there have a similar problems or have similar challenges or feeling.
Maybe you can share with us, or maybe you can comment on them.
Okay, and so the unmotivated student is a big one, and sometimes as a teacher, as you can see in the next slide, sometimes we don't actually recognize how our students are feeling.
Yeah.
Like whether it's kind of like this Irish setter that we see here. They come in, they don't always let us know that they're feeling happy or interested or depressed or angry. So sometimes we're not really aware of how our students feel, either because they don't show it or we don't recognize it. So I thought this was a cute slide to share. So what does a motivated student look like to you? Any ideas out there? How can you tell when your students are motivated?
For example, in my case, when I am in a class and I see people who are very interested in what I'm saying, I can say they are motivated. Or when they are eager to participate. Because you can see some people that are just there sitting, but they don't really care about what you're saying. But you can recognize, because these people are like raising their hands, they want to participate, they want to say something, they want to help saying something in the things you are developing, the contents you are showing.
So what does a motivated student look like? Well, I think if we look at the video, we have a little short video we want to show you and talk a little bit about the, I see we're having some problems. Some of you are having problems with your connection, and I think Rebecca is working on that.
Yeah, you have to be patient.
Mm-hmm. So we have a short video we want to show you that a student, it's very short, so we're going to play the video in a moment here, if we can get it on. I think it's coming on now. We have to move between our PowerPoint and the video. So this is a very short video. We want to show you about a student that we think...
¿Cómo te llamas? Me llamo Mike. Me llamo Mike. ¿Dónde está el baño? Feliz cumpleaños. ¿Qué hora es? ¿Qué hora es? La 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 la. Me gusta la biblioteca. Vivo en la Casa Roja. Yo tengo 2 bicicletas. Muchas gracias y de nada. ¿Cuántos años tienes? Un momento, por favor. It's the one semester Spanish love song. Mi mamá es bonita. Mi gato es muy blanco. Perdóneme, perdóneme. La 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 la. 1, 2, 3 y 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No remember how to say 11. Antonio Banderas, nachos grande, y cinnamon twists. It's the one semester of Spanish love song. Oh, wow.
So you could see a person who was studying Spanish, right? Okay, and he was trying to produce as much as he could. Okay, but what kind of motivation do you think he was? He was moved, or he was moved because he felt motivated. So what kind of motivation moved him to, engage in this song? What do you think? What do you think, Debra?
I think it's a funny video because he's using every word he learned, and I think he was very motivated. And I think students are motivated to learn. They're always motivated to learn, whether they learn what we want them to learn. But obviously, this young man was very motivated, and he had a type of motivation that you could talk about in the next slide. As you can see in the next slide, his motivation was possibly...
Okay. So there are 2 forms of motivation. Yes, from there you can see, right? You can motivate by fear, you can motivate by reward, but both of these methods are only temporary. The only lasting thing is self-motivation. So we are talking about extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. Okay? So which one is more important? Extrinsic or intrinsic motivation? So the motivation that is produced by something from outside that motivated you to do something, or or could be the intrinsic motivation, the one that comes from inside. Which one do you think is more important, Debra?
Well, and I would hope we could get some response from our audience, but I think what we're trying to work on as a teacher is that intrinsic motivation. Well, we only have 90 minutes a week. When you say 2 class periods at the secondary level, students only really have 90 minutes. And some of that's cut by, as you mentioned, interruptions. So motivating, I think one of our jobs is to excite students and to get them excited about learning English and have that intrinsic motivation, because so they'll go out and do their own work and find things on their own and find reasons to practice English. I often hear that students don't want to study English because it's boring. And so what we want to do is we want to motivate our students, as you can see in this slide, to be competent, and that is that they feel that they can have strategic use. They can feel that they have the function and the form, but we also want them to be more than that, confident, so that they have opportunities to produce language. And that
they're not afraid of making mistakes.
No, they're not afraid of making mistakes. And so they get that confidence by us providing and making or creating situations for them to use language in a realistic way. And that goes to the communicative competence and communicative strategies that we use as teachers, and make opportunities or create opportunities for our students so that we create competent, confident, and communicative students in English.
Yeah, I would say the 3 C's, C, 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 are very, very important. In order for making a student produce the language.
Yeah, and so and if we listen to our students, we can hear what they're telling us. In the next slide, we can see that. Can you read?
Okay, yes.
We have
Dalton from Cajamarca. He's our first guest.
Oh, and what does he say?
Okay, he says, I think intrinsic motivation is highly important. Yes, as we were saying. I mean, as you were saying as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. This is like the engine that moves you to action. It's something that you have there inside. And that self-motivation makes you learn things in a better way and learn things in a more memorable way so that you will not forget very easily.
And Dalton, I wonder if you have any strategies that you use that you might want to share as we go through today, and that you or any of you out there that you might use to foster that intrinsic motivation, because that's really what I think our job as an English teacher is, to get our students excited about learning language and create those opportunities. Because if we listen to our students, as you can see on this slide, what they're telling us, the culture of schools tends to be very impersonal. This comes from mega studies, giving opportunities to work constructively with peers. We're given very few opportunities to work with our peers and connect to teachers. You walk into classrooms, even the schools are not set up, and our classrooms sometimes are not set up to foster that. I just worked in an immersion institute this past week with teachers, basically, but we were working on communicative competence and production. We really wanted our students to produce. And trying to refit the classrooms was an issue, just to get it so students could face each other and talk. They also say instruction is passive and boring rather than active and related to real-life issues. That there's a lot of teacher talk and very little student talk when we go in. And one of the rules that I try to do is never talk more than 10 minutes. without processing something. And one of their favorites with particularly adolescents is the system is undemocratic and at times seemingly unfair. That's a real complaint of high school students. And so what they really want, on the next slide you can see, is they want to be included. On the next slide, some of the things that they've told us. That school should be a place where there's a sense of belonging, that you're able to be important, present yourself, and state your needs and be acknowledged. Often we don't have the materials or resources in our schools. We may not have all the technology. We're going to be showing you some technology and giving you some tips, but maybe you don't have that in your school. But we all have our students themselves. They bring that through the threshold of the classroom every day. And we all like to talk about ourselves, don't we?
Yeah. And since you're saying that we have to worry about students, we must make them feel included. We must try to listen to them. Okay, we need to think about the importance of a student-centered classroom. So why do you think a student-centered classroom is important? We would like to listen some opinions. What do you think about this? Because if the student is the center, then everything will be around him. So, but why is that important? So that the students really produce the language. So what do you think? Okay, maybe you can tell me something, Debra, about the importance of a student-centered classroom.
Well, I think it's a little bit about, if we look at the research, what students are saying, that they feel that they're not important, that they're not valued, and that it is difficult to make mistakes if you don't feel that there's a trusting, caring environment.
Yeah.
And you're not going to produce. And we really want students to produce, because that's the problem I see.
Yeah.
I see they're given a lot of grammar.
Mm-hmm.
We give them a lot of grammar, and they might know the rules, but they're afraid to produce. And when I say produce, I mean speak and write.
Yeah, and the ultimate, or we can say goal for learning a language is communication.
Absolutely.
So if we know that is our goal, then we need to work to reach this objective, to make it true. And so maybe if we see the next slide, we will see some ideas on why the student-centered classroom is important. Okay?
I like the circle on that.
Yeah. So you can see a group of students there in this cycle, but they are the center. And if we have student-centered classroom, then our lessons will be more interesting because we are working around the student. Lessons are going to be more memorable, students held accountable for their learning. The different learning styles are going to be taken into account. And this is really important because not everybody learns the same way. We need to be aware of that. We need to understand that people learn in different ways. And so teachers have to be preparing materials so that they can reach all these different styles. And this is also enables more informal assessment. So there is a better rapport with teachers. So this relationship that they develop is much better. And if students feel relaxed, then learning will take place.
And that goes back to that whole affective filter, crashing. And when you were talking, Lourdes, I was reminded of the Chinese proverb which says, "Tell me and I'll forget."
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Do you remember that? Tell me I forget.
And do it, and I will remember.
Involve me.
And
I will learn.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think we have some audience comments here.
We have another guest, and he says the environment of the classroom can really affect the learner if not appropriate. What do you think? The environment, of course.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And we have Robert Carvajal.
Hi, Robert.
And he says student-centered is highly important. Yeah.
And Robert was an instructor in our immersion program last week
Hi,
here in
Robert.
Arequipa. Hi, Robert. And he absolutely had a student-centered, highly involved, energetic classroom. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, having a student-centered classroom again, I mean, all of us know that, but we need to work on that a lot more so that, you know, students get to communicate and the students feel that we really care about the things they're doing.
So when you have a student-centered classroom, you're more a facilitator of learning than you are a transmitter, you know. But it's so much fun. I just, you know, to hear from your students. So on the next slide.
Okay. In the next slide, there is a very nice, saying. Here it says, so genuine learning is active, not passive. It involves the use of the mind, not just memory. It is the process of discovery in which the student is the main agent. Okay, I think this is absolutely true. Okay. And well, before we move on to the next slide, I would like to pose a question. How do we create a student-centered classroom? Okay, we have some comments here, like, for example, another guest, to get a good rapport is very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And students will produce if they feel like there's a connection.
Exactly. They will feel more confident to produce and make mistakes because they will feel they won't be punished because, you know, mistakes is part of learning. And they will take it, okay, well, I have made mistakes. My teacher is correcting me because my teacher wants me to learn. So the students will feel motivated.
And humor. Laugh. If you as a teacher, you make mistakes too. You have to laugh at yourself and be willing to risk yourself as a teacher, don't you?
Yeah. And we have another person, Laura Cano. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Okay. He looks really motivated. What do you mean about the maybe previous picture? Okay.
And Patricia says that teachers are the key.
Oh, yeah.
Teachers, you are the key in that classroom. I mean, you have the power. You have the power, and you have to in order to teach, you've got to reach. You can't teach them if you can't reach them. That's my I was going to say lema in Spanish. But you know, you gotta reach them first, and you are so important. The effects that you have in that classroom.
Okay, yeah, that's why we can't be replaced by machines, you know, because the teacher is the one who's going to identify the needs of students and are going to choose the best materials so that can be the most efficient and the most productive for students, beneficial, right? Okay, and Laura kind of mentions intrinsic motivation again, or well, you know,
it's so important.
Yeah. Daisy Gomez. Okay, she says, I'm totally in agreement. Learner-centered classroom is the key. Teachers should take into account students' needs and interests.
Absolutely. Because we start where they're at, and they will, you know, if it's something that they're interested in, like sports or whatever, if they're interested in, they will go deeply into that. And one of the references that we have at the end for you is Krashen, and he talks about really getting students to go deeply into a subject rather than covering so much material. They will learn more when they're really motivated. They'll read the books. You know, he talks about Spider-Man, how much he read Spider-Man comics, but he's talked about getting them compelling material so that they will go more deeply into something, and they will be intrinsically motivated, and they will learn in spite of our classes, basically. We're getting a lot of comments now, Ms. Lourdes.
Yeah. Okay, we have also another guest. That's a good quote. It's better to make errors while learning instead of not making any mistakes at all. That is how they learn by mistake. Yeah, of course. Mistakes are an opportunity for us to learn. So we need to transmit that to our students so that they are not afraid. Sometimes, they feel afraid of saying something, so they prefer not to say anything at all, so they do not produce. So we are not achieving the goals we really want for our students. Okay? And we have also Norma, mistakes should be seen as learning steps. Okay, that's true. Laura Cano, I like how that sounds, Norma, learning steps. Another guest, we as teachers are only a facilitator of the learning for our students.
Absolutely, the knowledge in the world is just tripling it's doubling every 3 years now, maybe even more with the explosion of the information age and the internet. And we can lead our students to that knowledge and how to find it, Lourdes.
Okay.
So
if we move to the next slide, okay.
On the next slide.
Okay, well, what kind of classroom is this? Well, that is the ideal classroom, right? Very few students. You have them working in groups. That would be the ideal environment. They are all relaxed. All of them are sharing, and they are trying to work together to find the answers. They are trying to discover by themselves. So the teacher doesn't even appear in that picture. Okay, he's facilitating, maybe he's moving around the class, just helping. But, the main work is done by students.
And giving them opportunities to speak. When I'm in front of a classroom, and if you're a polite student, which Lourdes is a polite student, you're not talking over me. So creating those opportunities in collaborative groups or in strategies, like lineup strategies or tea party strategies or some of the strategies where they actually get to practice language.
We need to use these strategies, group work, we need to pair students.
Pair them up, pair share.
Yeah, we need to work on that. Also reciprocal teaching, which is very important. So they not only answer, because sometimes our students are like trained to answer, but they don't know how to ask. So, asking and answering is part of interaction. So we need to worry, we need to care about both aspects.
Yeah, and I think Lourdes too, we have to, when we set them up to these conversations, we need to give them a frame and model. Whatever we do, we have to model for them because they don't know sometimes. So if we begin with structures, open-ended, like we give them a sentence structure, if we're going to talk in a circle or we're going to work in a collaborative group.
Yeah.
And we give the students roles to play as well so that everybody has to interact.
Yeah. That means also organization. It's not a matter of, okay, get together and that's it. You need to organize what you're doing. You need to plan what you're doing. And we have also other opinions. Okay, we have Mildred from Venezuela.
Hi, Mildred. We're glad you're here.
It could be difficult to adapt it in an online environment. Yeah, what about, learning through the maybe internet? Okay, well, for that, you need also to have some strategies, and you need to be very autonomous. But I would say if in your class, your teacher gives you that autonomy, that independence, and you are motivated, then you can go to internet, you can learn, and you can get the best from those tools we have there, and the websites. But you need, of course, some experience that your teacher, and maybe some tools your teacher provided in class so that you can continue your learning, because your learning doesn't have to stop in the classroom. That is, the ideal student should be also investigating, should be searching for more information, more activities outside the classroom. What do you think, Debra?
Well, I think one of the new models, and it's really new, and I've been working with some teachers here in Arequipa that are using it, not in English class, but could be applied, is this notion of flipped instruction, where instead of covering all the things in class or introducing in class, the students we're going to talk a little later. It's kind of moving us into what we want to talk about a little later. But having students do some of the work before they come to class and using that as the conversation. But there are tools on the internet that you can, there's Skype, there's all kinds of things we're going to show you in a minute. But any of you have ideas, it would be great to chime in here.
Okay, we have some other opinions here. Laura can again try to create a stress-free environment for students. Well, that is the ideal way to learn. If your affective filter is low, then everything will be easy. You will feel relaxed and no problem at all. And we have also Cynthia Javes Rojas. They say, hello, Lourdes and Debra. Hello, Cynthia. And she says, we can make students participate a lot so we can create a student-centered classroom. Yeah. That is the key, okay, to make them participate. And it is a collaborative class, as Daisy says, okay. Needs and interests, of course, are very important. And Cynthia also says, doing different activities that get students' attention, using topic they like. Okay, that's the way, right? To have a student-centered classroom. Right. Okay, they're learning intrapersonal according to Garner, multiple intelligences in the classroom.
Right. So using some of that interesting materials, we look on the next slide, we can see that if you're using interesting material, if you're bored, students will be too. I mean, how many of you have looked at your curriculum and go, oh my God, I have to teach that today? So if you're bored, they're probably bored too. I mean, teaching should be fun. It should really be fun. And so using some of the material that's relevant to our students' lives, like Facebook posts, Twitter feeds, articles about their own country and city, and getting away from that textbook. Yeah. We can be so textbook driven, very much so. And so getting away and getting into some of the ridiculous websites, funny things. So if you think about it, think about maybe how you learned a language versus how students learn a language today. Can think about, how did you learn a language?
Oh, that was a long time ago. So in my case, well, in my particular experience, it was, grammar translation. I had a book that had English and Spanish. Everything was translated. So it was just memorizing lists of verbs and to know some structures, but it was not meaningful at all. I mean, not contextualized, not personalized. It was, just kind of memorizing, and that's it. So communication was not the important focus.
And I, way back in the dark ages, the last century, with audiolingual method, and it wasn't very, we learned to pronounce because I started studying when I was really young, Spanish, but it was like, hola, taco. Hola, Paco, ¿dónde está el taco? Kind of repeated dialogue. So, but we have a whole new generation of students. They're wired differently. As you can, how do you think students? How do you think students learn today out there? Anybody? What do you see there?
Yes. Well, I have other comments about the previous slides about collaborative tasks that should be carefully planned, of course.
So they learn through collaboration?
Yeah. But something important you said about generations. Sometimes teachers think that students should learn the way teachers did. But, we belong to a different generation. We were not born when the internet and these tools, appeared, these social networks and everything. So we need to be aware of that. Sometimes we don't want to say, because it's much easier for us to just do the same thing every year, every day, but we need to update, of course.
Well, Gardner says
that implies time, that implies effort, but we are professionals, we need to do it.
Well, and Gardner says we tend to teach like we like to learn.
Yeah, okay,
And also,
yeah.
you know, we're digital immigrants. And as you can see in the next slide, the group, most of the students we're working with now are what we call Generation Y. And they're digital natives, and they want to work smarter, not harder. You know, they're into instant because they're into. I mean, they were born. They're wired differently. There's actually research that they've done with MRIs,
Okay, here I have
magnetic resonance imaging, and they say that their brains are wired differently. And somebody has a comment.
Sorry for interrupting,
No.
but we have a guest here. I learned Castellano by music and the television's closed caption because when I actually did, I read books about learning Spanish. I was dying of boredom and lost interest. So, you know, yeah, that's good. Okay, so this person must be a very young person, young teacher.
Oh, wait, they're commenting.
Okay, another person says, okay, Deisa, I studied English in the same boring way. I mean,
oh, wow.
Maybe it's the same boring way I described. Just lists of words, memorizing things. And also, well, Deisa says grammar translation based. Mildred from Venezuela, I learned it by repeating and repeating. That was your...
audio lingual method.
Yeah, okay. You had like fixed conversation.
We probably have the same generation.
Okay. Then Patricia, students learn rapidly when they use the language they are using in their context.
Absolutely.
For example, games.
Yes.
Yeah, what do you think?
Games are wonderful. Wonderful. And that's like we have on the screen, they're highly kinesthetic and visual. They've lived with games. They've lived with those video games, and I mean, I remember my own children. You know, they do that, and so they love entertainment games, and they love tasks that are customized to them, and they seek a purpose and a passion. They're very passionate, the Generation Y. So if we can hook into that or connect to that through games, and starting with games, and the only thing that I see sometimes with the Generation Y is their social skills are not as advanced.
That's true, yeah.
And that's some of the research is showing that we need to create some social situations along with the other things they're doing on the internet, and that they're not wired socially because they can be more solitary.
Yeah, that's true, because sometimes they are in their laptops or in these tablets or their cell phones.
Absolutely.
And they prefer to be with their tools instead of being interacting with people where this thing has changed a lot.
And they're used to instant feedback. And that's why I think the internet and the technology can be a great tool for us if we use it correctly. We can help our students get that instant feedback. What are some of the ways that you might be using it in your classroom, those of you out there? Because we have a collective knowledge of all you English teachers in Venezuela and other parts of this whole Andean region. What are some of the ways that maybe you're incorporating some of the technology resources in your classroom? We'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, so that you can fit Generation Y's needs. Because they are a very special generation. Well, Laura, for example, mentions by creating a student-centered classroom, we will be producing self-motivated students. Of course, students will feel, okay, the teacher really cares about me, about the things I'm doing. So this is really going to motivate them, you know. Norma, work smarter, not harder. However, some do need to work harder or they will never get it.
They'll never get smarter.
I like to customize. It's more work for me, though. Yeah, as I mentioned before, I mean, teachers should look for a lot of materials. They need to explore other activities. They need to read a lot, you know, to update with the new research. But anyways, this is going to help you eventually.
Well, you know, with the internet, you know, there are so many resources on the internet now for teachers. If you simply type in a topic, I know I was putting a presentation together yesterday, and I wanted a graphic organizer for that, and I just typed in what I wanted, and you can even create your own. So I think as teachers, we can also get on the internet and find a lot of resources.
Of course.
Or we can have our students help us find those resources.
Yeah.
Because they know a lot more about the computer than I do.
They can be our helpers, and they can help us, right? Of course.
Of course. And they're going to learn. Teaching is learning. More learning.
Mm-hmm. Interesting topics and interesting resources and activities are easy to find on internet nowadays, according to the data, Gomez. Okay, yeah, that's true. I mean, whatever you type there, you're going to find lots of information, but you need to be careful about the sources as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. When you maybe give them or assign some homework, it is a good idea to give them some links to guide the students, because sometimes we tell them, okay, investigate this or that, but we also need to provide them with some tools to investigate some strategies they have to use, like summarizing, okay, like skimming, scanning, because those are going to help them.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So giving them, going right into that, on our next slide, there's some resources that can help students actually practice their oral language production, or actually give you some ideas on the next slide. There's YouTube. There are so many things on YouTube. Some of them, as you said, you really need to filter through. But there are things on the YouTube, and actually you can have students make videos and put on the YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
They love that. They can publish their work. There's CNN, also, that you can download. The TED Talks are absolutely wonderful. And I want to give credit, too, for the next few slides to some of my fellow elves out there. I have borrowed some of their slides, and I've enhanced some of them. And if you haven't gotten into Dave's ESL Cafe, it's wonderful. If you want your students to practice their listening skill, Randall's Cyber Listening Lab is another one. There's also the Merriam-Webster dictionary that's phenomenal. It helps them. It takes them to different places. David Fay was sharing some activities with me on last Friday on the Webster. Skype, I would really, really, really encourage you to get into Skype, particularly if you want your students to practice with native speakers. And I have a colleague who's looking for a group here in South America to pair with her students in the States. So anyone that's interested, please contact me, because she would like for them to practice. And there's very few opportunities sometimes for our students to practice. It's hard to catch a gringo in the square here in Arequipa. It's a little dangerous sometimes.
Okay.
So Skype
is much safer.
Also, there are people in the States who would be willing, if you can get Skype into your classroom. I don't know how hard that is for some of you, but there are people that would be willing to talk to your students from the States or from other English-speaking countries via the Skype. So that's a great resource to put students in contact with native speakers or even with each other.
Yeah, and we have some opinions. For example, Jimmy, students learn linguistic, logical, spatial, interpersonal, naturalist from different ways, of course. And Patricia says it's funny, students are sitting face-to-face by chatting using WhatsApp or Facebook chat.
WhatsApp is another one, Facebook, yeah, Facebook.
We have a lot of tools, right? When preparing a project, Sole says, when preparing a project, asking students to prepare online presentations, so that they have, it's, as I mentioned before, I mean, when you assign a homework, you can tell them, okay, just go to the net and find the sources and give me the summary or whatever, but we need to provide them with some tools to guide them and maybe to help them also. If it's summary, maybe some drafts so that the teacher can go over them and help them, to correct them.
Well, models, as we talked about earlier, we need to give students models, because if you've never done something like that, never made a presentation. And you also need to give them what you're looking for, some rubrics or some, so they know what your expectations are.
Exactly. Yeah, and sometimes, evaluation and assessment is kind of hidden. It's like top secret for teachers and they do not share.
Right.
So I think an assessment is more valid if reliable, if you share the criteria of evaluation with students.
Absolutely. It
So
shouldn't be a secret.
But sometimes
it is.
Yeah, you get a score and you don't know, okay, well, what's, the criteria my teacher used. So that is going to help them also. And we have also solely using PowerPoint slides to introduce vocabulary, to provide prompts for exercise. For example, in Cultural, we have the interactive boards.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot of help because you can bring your own PowerPoint presentations that you already prepared at home.
Perfect.
Yeah, with examples, exercises. Also, you can go to internet in the class. So that is really effective and really useful.
And you have an archive of films here too, activities too that you've archived.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that all of that is helpful.
So,
okay, and YouTube is very useful, and as long as the lesson is urban and not all textbook, it makes it more interesting for them. You have to reel them in with a hook like fishing. Okay. So yeah, of course, YouTube. Okay, so as you mentioned before, right? It's very, very useful.
I love to see them. It goes back to I love to see myself. I love to talk about myself, and there's so much production that goes in there. They have to read and write and listen and speak and produce, and that's what we want our students to do: produce. So Lorna's going to go through some other activities, and some of these, as I said, we're taking suggestions on the next slide. Mm-hmm. Some of the things you can do without.
Yeah, that is community member talk. That could be, for example, you invite a friend or a colleague to the class in person or using Skype, as you mentioned, to discuss a topic that is important to the class. Environment, public health, education, crime. That is really important because you are having exposure to the native language. And people are going to feel so relaxed because it is not a topic maybe from the book. It's not like grammar-based. No. It's like free talking.
And if I could connect my classroom with your classroom, we could do presentations and you could ask me questions. We could have debates even. I did that once with a group.
Great.
So they debated from one city in California to another city via the Skype because they couldn't be together. So, you in the whole region, we could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Elita Ruiz says, I suggest she give us a website there, epulse.com. You can contact classes in the same grade and age all around the world.
Oh, wow.
Students are grouped according to their interest, subject. And last year it was amazing, she says. My second grade Skype with Canadian students.
Wow.
Okay, so that is www.epulse.com. That could be also helpful.
Yes, I'll have to make note of that one.
Okay. And other suggestions also to promote students or production could be broadcast a TED Talk.
Yeah. There's something every day on TED Talk that just, and even your students can maybe get put onto TED Talk.
Mm-hmm. And use the talk as a springboard for discussion. And you have there also a link you can visit. Okay. And if we move on to the next slide, okay. We will say something about video clips.
Okay. I love video clips.
Videos are really interesting, right? It is something different from the daily routine in the class. And of course, you can exploit it in a way that your students will use the language. So like, for example, what activities do you suggest to use? Maybe you can suggest some activities you could work with a video clip to make your students produce.
Well, I love the Mr. Bean series. And the one we put on here is actually New Year, for the New Year, the relevant. But there's not a lot of conversation in the Mr. Bean, and you can have your students watch a small part of it. You don't want to overuse videos because you really want them to interact, but they can create conversations from that. And then one of my favorite things I used to do was living history. You actually put the movie up. I mean, you could do it without video clips. You could do it with a TV if you had it and turn the sound off. But you could have students actually become characters in the Mr. Bean clip. In the clip that we have here, he's actually doing a New Year's party. And at the New Year's party, there's very little conversation. And so your students could actually get into you can project it, and they can actually get into the video and be a character.
Of course, that they can role play and they can practice their English in a free way. I mean, no grammar structures, no restrictions because of vocabulary or phrases you have to use this or that. But it's just free, conversations, free speaking. And that is, very motivating for students, like to create opportunities like this using a video clip.
Using their creativity and their kinesthetics and so much.
And Sully mentions the beauty of the TED Talks is that the topics are varied and interesting and last according to our time limitations. Okay, yeah, you can get to manage that. And Sandra says, I'm convinced that the students are able to learn whatever is interesting for them. So it is the teacher's duty to figure out which are those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we really agree with you. Okay, and we also have other suggestions, and there are other...
Came from one of our other colleagues.
Yes, if we move on to the next slide.
Doing some interactive listening and chatting. These are some...
Yeah. So there are some tools that we can use, like, for example, these sites, English Club, also ESL Cafe, Skype, as we mentioned before, the Google Hangout, Facebook chat or video chat, Global Schoolhouse. So are options we need to exploit. And even if we don't have the computer in the classroom, we need to guide our students to provide them with these links and to help them, explore them so that they can produce, they can practice.
They have so much power in their cell phones now. I mean, they really do. And then there are some more sites we'd like to share on the next slide for you. And I think this will be archived, so if you don't need to copy them down. But these were some that we got from our colleagues as well. So there's lots and lots, and I'm sure you all have more of your own. I mean, you've already mentioned a few that you can share. National Geographic for me is just a big one. Amazing. And the American History Channel as well.
Yeah.
You can find quite a bit. And NPR, National Public Radio. And I also want to make sure to mention American English State Gov, which you can find a link on RELO.Andes and Voice of America. There are so many resources. For me, it's not a question of not having enough resources. It's trying to go through them and go through and figure out what we would like to do to personalize the content on the next slide.
And personalizing is very important. And I think most of you, we are teachers, most of us know about personalizing. The importance of making it, appealing for our students and to use real situations. Like, for example, how to ask for food in a restaurant. Or, for example, if you go to a supermarket, in that situation, how to ask to a salesperson, how to ask for help. We need to look for real situation.
Well, and right now the Olympics are going on, much better. And there's a great link on that American English page, too. So students are really interested in the Olympics right now.
Yeah, and now that the championship, the soccer championship is coming in
World Cup?
Brazil, the World Cup.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah. Everything stops here on the World Cup.
Yeah. Okay. And also, well, data analysis, this is something that I agree with her. The resources are available, but teachers don't know how to use them sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah. So you have sometimes the idea, but you don't know how to really use it. So how can you transmit it if you don't even know? I mean,
Well, yeah,
it's hard.
I think it's difficult, but I think if you just take the risk and get on the internet, I mean, I'm probably one of the older ones members here in the group, and I'm on the internet all the time looking and searching, and so I think we just have to take the risk, or have our students help us too. Sometimes they
All our kids.
are our children.
Yeah, if you have your sons, daughters, they know a lot, so they can be like your facilitators also. Okay, and on the next slide, we also have this idea of using student-generated materials. Okay, so you can use pictures of your students instead of using pictures of any people. You just choose your students or your students' names, so that can be used. Okay. Okay. Also, you can ask your students to design flashcards, so you're using the material they're producing. Okay. And finally,
this was shared by one of our colleagues, I believe, in Panama, that I really like this one, the questioning hand in the next slide.
Yeah. We have in the last slide, involving the student in grammar explanations. Like, for example, using the hand, right? The question hand, like using the question word, the auxiliary, the noun, the verb, complement. So each finger could be like, it's going to mean one word, right? So that you remember the right structure. Okay? So what do you think about involving grammar explanations or making it more in a more natural way? That would be great, right? Okay, and also Sully says that personalizing can also be like an activity, a wrapping up activity. It can be used as a wrapping up activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you can go through the contents, and then to finish the lesson, you can maybe personalize it like a role playing, for instance. Okay.
Okay. I would just say, and we do have some references for you on the last slide that we have here today that you might want to look into on our next slide, references. Stephen Krashen, this is an article I was talking to you about teaching compelling teaching, and he talks about reading and he talks about listening, but I think there's also quite a bit in there about production, because in order to be able to speak, you do need to be able to listen and write and read, and that leads to writing. And then this is a book that Lourdes and I found very, very helpful to us, with lots of activities. It's Frank Journey Toward the Caring Classroom. There's lots of activities in there.
Yeah, very appealing for students.
And then my favorite, and I am a TRIBES trainer, is that Jeannie Gibbs worked. There are lots and lots of activities and structures in there that you can use to create a community-involved classroom where your students have a sense of community, where they feel very comfortable in producing and communicating and building relationships. And that's what communication is all about. And we thank you very much for...
Yeah, and if you have any questions left,
and what little bit of time we have left.
We have 1 minute. Maybe if you want to say something else, any doubt, or any final comments. Mm-hmm.
But we really appreciate all the participation and all of your work.
Thank you very much for your ideas. Yes. They were very helpful for us, to move on in this webinar.
And here in beautiful downtown Arequipa, the historic district city.
Yeah, this is called
we invite you.
Okay, so there are, well, if there are no questions, okay, we can wrap up a little bit about the topic. So we can say in general that the most important thing for learning a language is communication, oral production. So we need to do everything is in our hands in order to make our students produce language. And there are many resources and some things we were sharing, some suggestions that we think can be useful for you all.
Yeah, and
Debra,
enjoy the classroom so that you create confident, competent, communicative students and use your creativity.
Yeah.
Because you are great teachers.
Okay, and be happy. Okay, enjoy it.
Enjoy it.
Enjoy what you're doing. Okay, see you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.